We suddenly have a lot of people who are looking at moving to Nicaragua quite soon, and people have a lot of questions when suddenly looking at it. So we have a lot of newbies in the general expat space, and a lot of people, especially those who haven't been doing a lot of research for a long time, have a lot of questions about Nicaragua as to how best to get into the country. And of course, one of those ideas that probably comes up a lot is the idea that you kind of want to ease your way in. If you're coming to Nicaragua, just like any country, if you're coming from somewhere else, which is the presupposition, you're going to be coming into a bunch of culture shock, and a bunch of things are going to be different than what you're used to. Let's get my dog here in the video. And in doing so, we generally want to minimize that a little bit one way or another. We all understand that there's a lot of things we can't minimize, of course, but there is a lot of opportunity to make that experience a little bit softer landing, if you know what I mean. We all have these concerns. Well, when I get there, I'm not going to know how to do anything. I'm not going to know anybody. I'm going to really want to have as many of the comforts and commonalities of my old life as possible. Maybe not as a long-term goal, but at least in those first few days or weeks or months, so that we can adjust over time. And that's a reasonable theory. The idea of coming in, jumping in both feet first and just going whole hog into any new culture is scary and potentially a little bit dangerous. Not so much from a violence or that kind of perspective, but from the opportunity that you have to jump in, find that it's all too much of a shock, and decide that you want to leave because it ends up not being to your liking, or that you don't feel you're able to adapt. We have some stories on the show over the years of a few people, and they're really not that many, who did exactly this. Came down to Nicaragua specifically, went 100% in. They had no fallback plan. They had no deep research ahead of time, didn't do any investigatory trips before they came, just showed up, went straight into a place like Leon, and had no idea what they were going to do. They hadn't done really a ton of research from my show, or they did, but they didn't take it seriously, and some real basic things. They were just overlooking things we talk about all the time, and they really thought that they could just show up, rent a place in a couple days, and have a simple, straightforward, long-term lifestyle that they could move into on that first day. And of course, one, a lot of those beliefs were wrong, and two, they really didn't have a good picture, I don't think, of what the lifestyle was going to be here. And a lot of the things that we talk about are super ephemeral. It's very hard to describe exactly, one, what any given lifestyle in a place actually is. How do you truly convey how it even affects us? And also, everyone's lifestyle is actually a creation of a combination or a fusion of the place that they're moving to, in this case Nicaragua, and themselves. So even if you were to move into my house and do everything as close to what I do as possible, your experience in Nicaragua will be different, because your interactions with it will be different than mine, and its interactions with you will be different than it is with me. And so everyone has somewhat of a unique experience. That sounds obvious to say, but a lot of people are quite surprised by that, and are thinking that they can predict a lot more about what their experience is going to be like than they really can. So this is something that we have to worry about. So how do we address that? And a lot of people wisely are looking for a way to do this soft landing. How do you get into the country and not get hit with that culture shock to a point where it causes you to panic or feel despair or feel trapped and end up in a situation where you're unhappy and feel the need to get out, or just unhappy and trapped? Like, that's not good either. We want you to be flexible and safe and just be in a great position. So these dogs are being adorable. I love having them on the show when they're like this. So I did do some things myself. If you watch my videos, some of you will know what we did. And I think our approach, which was completely haphazard and accidental, so I don't want to come across as being wise and having this incredible insight into what I should do. Absolutely not. We got really lucky, but having now lived here for a long time, I think that our experience was very fortunate and very useful, because I do think it was a good process. But that leads us to the original question, or the thing that prompted this. Was a number of people have asked me this over the years, but someone asked it just the other day, or suggested it, was that, is San Juan del Sur, which for those who don't know, the very famous southwestern beach kind of resort town, the really famous party town from all of the travel brochures and the YouTube channels and such, is San Juan del Sur a good place to go and do this soft landing, or to do a halfway village where you live there and get used to Nicaragua and then move to wherever your long-term, your forever home is going to be? And this is a great question. So Let's dig into why San Juan del Sur might be and why people jump to this as such a good option. So primarily, San Juan del Sur is incredibly famous with people who are coming from abroad. So expats and tourists and backpackers and so forth. Chances are you've heard of San Juan del Sur. When I first came here 10 years ago, that was not the case. It was still well known, of course, but it was not well known anything like it is today. The YouTubers had not shown up yet. A lot of the structures and the locations and the Sunday Fun Day and all those things, they weren't in place yet. So the things that made it famous were later. I was first here in 2015. I visited San Juan del Sur and thought of it as a quaint beach town, but it was not something that really grabbed us in any particular way. And it was a very different place back then. Now, it's been around for a really long time. It's very important historically. It is the crossing point for the famous 49ers. Yes, the gold rush people in the United States more than anywhere else. Because the Panama Canal did not exist yet and railroads across the United States did not exist yet. And so the safest, fastest way to reliably get from the east coast of the United States to San Francisco was to sail to Nicaragua, come up the Rio San Juan, go through Lago Nicaragua or Lago Bolsa, as its true name is, and then get off at La Virgen and cross down what is now a short highway into San Juan del Sur, and from there on the Pacific coast to catch boats that were heading off to San Francisco by way of a very long trip up the Mexican coast. So that's really famous for that reason and pretty iconic for historians, of course. Today, it is mostly a party town, and it's famous for having an incredibly high, and the highest percentage by no small margin, of expats and foreigners living in it in all of the country. So if you're looking to be around an awful lot of expats, this is where you're going to go. Absolutely, no question, it's going to be a place where you can always find them. And because of that, it is a bit more expensive than other parts of the country. That doesn't make it expensive, right? Just more expensive than other places that are super affordable. So not a bad thing. It has a gorgeous bay that is not caused by that, obviously, just it is a major factor there. It has a lot of restaurants that cater with a lot of variety in a small area. It really is the only village-sized location in the country that has that, so that is a really major deal for sure. It has a lot of beachfront, of course. It does have a lot of parties, it has a lot of bars, it has some activities, and it has a fair number of hotels for what a small location it is. It has a lot of modern housing and modern housing developments. Not that the rest of the country doesn't, but these have a tendency to look and feel a little bit more like North Americans are used to, and similarly, right? And you have easy to find areas where you have large numbers of expats living in close proximity together, right? They're on the same road, they're on the same hillside. In many cases, they're in the same gated development, so that you have a closed community that's nearly all, or in some cases, completely all expats. So these are things that all sound really wonderful to someone who's looking for a soft landing. And all of those things that I mentioned absolutely are. Now, there are some problems, though, with San Juan del Sur that I think make it not ideal as a place to come in and do that transition time, right? We're talking about people who are coming here first before anything else. The first thing is it's relatively remote. If you're coming in from Costa Rica, you've been living in Costa Rica, okay, that might be a little bit different. But if you're coming in through Managua, you're coming in and really looking at Nicaragua as a whole, then San Juan del Sur sits pretty far out on a far edge of it. It's not insanely far. You can still get to things, but it's very cumbersome to live in San Juan del Sur and explore outwards and try to really get to know Nicaragua. You're in no way in the center. You're in no way in the middle of the logistics path. You're at a very edge of the country and separated logistically from much of the country by a giant lake. And so to get anywhere, you have to skirt the lake on a really narrow isthmus and then get into the country. And you're right on the Costa Rican border, which if you want to explore Costa Rica, absolutely, then it makes complete sense. But if you're looking to explore Nicaragua, it does not. So as a place to kind of get introduced, it doesn't work out so well. A lot of people report that when they live in San Juan del Sur, they end up really not going very far afield. Sure, they'll explore the nearby beaches. They may go so far as Rivas and San Jorge and maybe even Ometepe, but really getting out and getting to know the country is really awkward and difficult just because of logistics. Nothing bad about San Juan del Sur, it's just really far away. The higher cost of living, of course, can be a little bit of a problem. If you're someone on a very tight budget, you don't want to be just for, you know, if it's the right place for you, then you want to be there. But if it's not the right place for you, you don't want to be adding extra expense without a really good benefit to it. It's not necessarily a huge deal, but a lot of those restaurants that I mentioned, they're generally priced a bit above the national norm for restaurants, and so you're possibly paying a 50% premium or 100% premium, which is still affordable. But those things add up. Your budget is likely going to be quite a bit different. If you're willing to eat more limited, like in the rest of the country, you'll have not that dissimilar prices, but it is noticeably more expensive and more difficult to find cheaper places. You may have to travel a little bit outside of the village to find the things that you want at prices that make sense for example. But you have way more things, so you're paying a premium and getting a premium. So it's all about a trade-off. But probably the biggest problem is cultural. San Juan del Sur really identifies as kind of a unique place within the country. Both the expat community there is large enough to act like an enclave, so you have a tendency to see your experience in San Juan del Sur of one of interacting with expats. And again, nothing bad with that. That's just, if you're looking as a stepping stone, that doesn't make it one. That actually can be, in some cases, difficult to become a stepping stone given that, because you can work around it, but it takes more work. But you can easily fall into a situation where you're surrounding yourself with expats, even accidentally, and you spend all of your time talking to expats, doing things with expats. And one of the things about expats, and we have a video on this recently, is that they don't necessarily have all the right information for you. They may not have the right experiences. They may not have the insight and so forth. And so you may end up spending time in a place either getting no information or a risk of misinformation. Of course, those things are always risks anywhere, but the risks are much higher. And so a lot of people that spend time in San Juan del Sur end up talking about it very much like it's a different place, almost like it's more Costa Rica than it is Nicaragua. It's not really true, but the feeling is there. And so when we meet people who have spent a lot of time in San Juan del Sur, often we end up coming away with a feeling much the same as meeting someone who may be familiar with Panama or Costa Rica, or maybe Guatemala or Mexico, and they have a fair idea what Nicaragua is like, but they're really missing a lot of the intricacies because San Juan del Sur is such its own culture and animal, and so physically isolated that it's able to maintain that. So if your goal is to investigate San Juan del Sur, you truly think it might be a place that's right for you, then absolutely you'll want to spend time there to be able to make that discernment. But if you really want to be in Nicaragua proper, not that San Juan del Sur is improper, but you know what I mean. If you want to be in the general population and explore Nicaraguan culture in the way that we show it primarily on this show, then San Juan del Sur probably makes a poor stepping stone for you. It will give you the benefits of a very soft landing in most cases. And if you're experienced with Costa Rica, it will be extremely soft. It will feel much like what you're used to. But when you then go to move into the rest of Nicaragua, you may experience nearly as much culture shock as if you hadn't done that soft landing at all. It's so soft, and even though there are parts that would still be culture shock, because people in San Juan del Sur are definitely going to jump on and say, but no, it's totally different than living in America. Absolutely, that is true. Not saying it's not in any way, but what it's not is not like living in Nicaragua either. It's a very different experience. It's just unique. It's not Costa Rica. It's not Nicaragua. It's not the United States. It's not Canada. It's its own animal. And that, in some ways, is its charm. It is a special place all to itself. I can't go to 10 other beaches on the coast and be like, this is my San Juan del Sur. No, there's one San Juan del Sur. It is what it is. If it's the right thing for you, it is the right thing for you. If it's not, then it's not. And that's it. So if you are pretty sure that your long-term goal is to live in the mountains, is to live on a surf beach, is to live in one of the interesting colonial cities, or one of the cattle ranch country, then you're not really, I don't think, going to get the right introduction to the country in San Juan del Sur that you could somewhere else. So that's my take. I think it's an option, and I don't want to say that you shouldn't do it, but I want you to be aware that it may not provide that introduction to Nicaragua in the general sense, in the way that you would think. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not the right place for you, but even if it was, it's generally not where I would start. And I have done some videos about this, so my regular viewers will jump right to, I know what he's going to say. He's got a place that he definitely recommends for this, and you are right. That place that I would recommend for a soft landing, and the one that I completely, without planning, lucked out and chose on my own by agreeing with my wife, who told me that's where we were going to go, but she also got lucky because she did not do that research either, is Granada. Granada is the tourist hub of the country, but it's a full city. It's not San Juan del Sur, which is a good-sized village, but just a village. Granada is one of the main cities of the country, and it's near the capital. Not super close, not to the point that you're feeling the capital's every present, influence on your everyday life, but ever present. I think that's what I was looking for, but it is close enough that anytime you need to run into the capital, go shopping at Price Mart, or to, just go out for a big variety of food, or you want to hit the malls or something, very easy to do. You don't have to have those resources in Granada because it's so close. You can just hop the bus and be there in like 30 minutes or something. If you have a car, so easy. And I've even walked to the neighboring city of Masaya, which is not the same as walking to Managua by any stretch, but you are able to get places. That part of the country is a lot of good-sized population centers very close to each other. So the benefits of Granada, for sure. One, it's not as expensive as San Juan del Sur, although it's awfully close. It is quite expensive, so you are going to be spending more money than you would in most of the country. But it's not terrible, and you can live outside the city center and save quite a bit of money. You can get affordable in Granada with a little bit of effort. I would probably start in the city center, be a little bit more touristy, but really quickly move out of it. So maybe put in 1 to 2 months, get an Airbnb or something like that, live in the city center, but use that time to make sure that it's an okay place for you, and then get a longer, maybe 6 month, maybe 12-month rental a little bit farther out, still in the city, not far away, still walkable, but not right in that tourist zone in the middle of the city. Granada doesn't have the density of restaurants like San Juan del Sur, but it's a much larger city, so its overall restaurant selection, in my opinion, is better. Not a lot better. San Juan del Sur is pretty impressive, but Granada probably gives you the best restaurant selection within a zone that doesn't require you to drive across Managua, hopping between all the barrios of Managua. So there's nowhere in Managua, in my opinion, that is able to match Granada's downtown restaurant variety and density. Because of all the tourists, Granada just wins this one hands down. It also has waterfront on Lake Colsibolsa, which a lot of people want Pacific Ocean waterfront because you're in Nicaragua. Why give up the Pacific Ocean? I totally get it. But the Pacific Ocean you can have in any number of countries. All of them awesome. All of them wonderful being on the Pacific. But Granada has the unique experience of having waterfront on Colsibolsa with a city, right? San Jorge also has that for Rivas. It's slightly different, also beautiful. But Granada's is really impressive, and it has a great waterfront park. It has a great pedestrian way. It has loads of restaurants. It has a number of museums. You have things to do, and it's a great launching point for exploring the country because it is pretty central. It's slightly south, it's slightly inland, but only a tiny bit. You'll have access to Masaya and Managua and all of their surrounds, which is a big zone within really, really quick distance, and public transportation around that zone is super simple. Getting to Rivas and Carazo, which are the two southern states here on the west, quite easy, right? It's quite easy to get to Ometepe, just as easy, maybe easier than from San Juan del Sur. Now, San Juan del Sur, of course, itself is pretty far away, but even that, relatively doable. There's good public transportation to get you out west to the Leon and Chinandega region. Now, getting up into the mountains, yeah, you're gonna have to go into Managua, and you're gonna have to do a bit more work, but they're not terrible and still doable within a day. If you're in San Juan del Sur, most of those things become, yeah, I can't really do it on a weekend trip. I got to make it into like a big thing. But if you're coming from Granada, you can probably make that weekend work still to run up to an Esteli or a Matagalpa or something like that. Still, I would recommend a 3-day weekend rather than a 2, but you get the idea. You have the easy ability to explore a lot of the country. And when I say a lot of the country, I mean by the population zones, right? San Juan del Sur, of course, has a bit of the country around it, but even that has a border to Costa Rica just south of it. The Pacific Ocean is right there on the west. The lake, Colsibolsa, is only a few minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes away to the east. And then to the north, yeah, it goes on for a while, or northwest. But you are actually physically constrained. The amount of physical land in the country, and especially the population that you can get to within, say, 45 minutes to an hour by car, is really tiny, like 2% of the country. But if you're coming from Granada, that 1 hour zone may be a third of the country, and a 2 to 3 hour zone would be something like 80% of the country is all within that circle, like the population area and a ton of the landmass. So it's a super practical place. And because it's a large city, you still have a little bit, much diminished from San Juan del Sur. You have the ability to kind of test the waters of slightly enclave living, but with the tiniest effort, you can step out of it. In San Juan del Sur, you're kind of influenced by it at all times. You can put forth great effort and avoid having an enclave experience in San Juan del Sur, but you've got to work at it. By default, you're going to lean into it pretty heavily, but it's always going to be there a little bit. In Granada, you really have to put the effort to end up in it, and as long as you don't try to end, you're probably going to be safe, and you're going to have a slightly influenced, loads of tourists, loads of expats experience in a place that is still a functional city with its own culture, its own history, its own identity within the country, and you're going to be able to very easily walk out of the city center, walk away from the museums and the downtown restaurants, and into the outer ring of Granada City, and have a very normal, something just landed on me, a very normal Nicaraguan city experience. So you can experience the barrios, you can experience lower cost living, you can experience old historic neighborhoods with very nice houses, and get a really good idea. Now remember, for those who don't know, it is one of the colonial cities, so it is unique with it and Acatal and León, in that they are super colonial. So most of Nicaragua is not going to look that way. It's much more modern, but it other than that, it's going to give you a much, I think, better introduction, where when you need those expat resources and those expats to sit and have dinner with, and that someone to hold your hand, I think there's enough of that you don't really gain more by being in San Juan del Sur, but you're going to have so much easier of a time being able to explore the country. You're going to be in a place where everyone just naturally connects with the rest of the country. They're part of the ecosystem rather than being kind of off on their own. You're going to have much better access to public transportation, or if you're going to drive, it's just that much easier. You're going to have a city that you can explore on its own and really get a feel for the culture, and wean yourself off naturally from going to expat resources to going to more Nicaraguan resources. And if that's not what you want to do, you can take yourself right back, right? You're in a position where you can make those decisions. And if you find that you really want to be in that expat world, move on to San Juan del Sur and see if that meets your needs better. Absolutely. But I would recommend, even if San Juan del Sur, unless it's 100% sure, if you're 90% sure that San Juan del Sur is going to be the right place for you, consider starting in Granada, get that feel, get that context of the country, then move to San Juan del Sur and appreciate it for the thing that it is, rather than ending up there by default and just hoping for the best that you found the right place. Now, if you're 100% sure, absolutely, it is sometimes just the right place for people, and other things aren't going to do it for them. But we do find an awful lot of people who go to San Juan del Sur, and because of the culture being so inclusive, that they really never step out of that comfort zone. Once they get used to San Juan del Sur, they kind of forget that they're on the edge of a really large country with a lot to offer and a bunch of interesting things, and they end up immediately looking for property, buying a car, getting to build a little community, and then being really sucked in, and years later realizing that there's this whole country that they have access to that they really haven't learned about and didn't make an educated decision about, and then they feel a little bit trapped. They've built their lives in a place that may be perfect for them, but only because they got lucky, not because they actually tested the waters and made sure. So we're hoping to give you guys the tools to have your introduction be a useful one that helps you, yes, ease into the country, but also explore the country and make good decisions. Now, does that mean that you couldn't come straight here to León? No, we're kind of a middling city. We're definitely not super exotic. We do have that colonial thing, like I said, but we do have enough expats, especially now, and I'll talk about that in a second, that you could easily come here and have enough of a soft landing that it shouldn't be a big problem. If you have the resources here, if you have friends, you have connections, yeah, come on out to León. Not going to be a problem. Same thing in Managua. You could do it there, but it is very different. I don't recommend that unless, again, you're really sure or have a specific need. If you have any questions, Granada is going to be the place that is best to start, but there are other options. I do want to point out, one of my viewers who's been in and out for years has been very aware of the community here around the country. He lives in Managua, and he was out in León the other day, and he said that he now sees more expats coming from my channel living here in León than anywhere else in the country. Now, he hasn't been to San Juan del Sur, but he lives in Managua, so he sees what the expats are like there. He's in Granada all the time. He sees what the expats are like there. He said, we're now more expats in León. I think that's just an impression. But it's an important one that traditionally we have seen so few, and in the last 6 months or so, the rate at which people are moving into León specifically is unprecedented. It is absolutely crazy how many people are moving in. We do really notice. And when we go out on Friday nights, our expat crew is growing. We're noticing that when we go places, we're recognizing people. We know people. We're like, and they're almost all from the channel, right? We're constantly like, that's so-and-so from the channel. That's so-and-so from the channel. And then that doesn't mean that they came here because of me, but they came here and used the resources and made contact and were aware of them or whatever. But it really has been an amazing thing to watch this change. And for us, it just seems like there's a lot more foreigners coming in. But my friend from Managua said, no, it's unique to Leon. This is very much the channel is driving something here that is very different. And it's true. Every person we meet in the city is like, oh no, watched your channel, saw Leon, learned about it, and decided it was a place for us. So I think Leon is turning into a place that very easily you could have that soft landing in the same way as Granada. The one thing that we have not adapted to and will take a long time is that the short-term rentals like they have in Granada, very hard to find in Leon. So from a cultural perspective, I think you have no problem. From a logistics of finding a place to live, Leon is becoming worse rather than better, because the rate at which people are looking for those places far outpaces the rate at which people are putting them on the market. So just be aware that that is a problem, one that will adjust over time, but at the moment is still an issue. Thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at the link above at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlanMiller. That comes directly to me. It's like Patreon and helps support us. I did a video that came out just a few days ago that talks about all the cameras that I use to do this show. That's just one little piece of all the expenses that are incurred doing this show. So your support really, it's not just a way to encourage me, although it does make me feel really good that people care so much about the show, but it also helps offset the cost, because we do have a lot to incur here, and we're not running a business here. We're not selling any services. We're not trying to lead you into buying a home or trying to buy some tourist services or anything like that. The show is the show. So we really appreciate the people who have helped make that possible. It makes a huge difference. We also have down in the show notes, go check that out. Anything you possibly could need is down there. How to contact me, how to send in a video question so you can be on the show, how to sponsor us, how to go to the GoFundMe for Marcela, who has stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. If you want to help support her in her journey, there's a video about that in the GoFundMe. Just go click that link and you can learn about how things are going there. We're hoping in about a month and a half, I think at this point, maybe a month, we're going to have her first feedback as to how her chemo is going. So we'll get her on the show and she will give as much feedback as she can at that time. And other than that, tell someone about the show, share on social media, and I will see all of you tomorrow.